So these slides were put together by our city attorney, which, as you guys may be aware, it's a contract city attorney from the firm Chronic and Moskowitz. That's why you see that labeling there. Very, very strong group of folks. And so this was prepared by our assistant city attorney, Andreas Bucher. So we're just going to start going through. Again, I'm going to go through for what I think is pretty quick, but if you have a question, stop me, interrupt. No issues with that. So essentially the purpose of the Brown Act, and I'm going to make this relevant to your meeting body, but it's to really help with how to conduct meetings and the decision-making process in front of the public, right? It does govern things like what a quorum is, what can be discussed, when agendas need to be posted, how to take public comments, things like that. But really, you know, the purpose and the development of the Brown Act was to protect the public's interest so that people who were either elected or appointed, similar to your meeting body, could make decisions behind closed doors without engaging the public or allowing the public access. A legislative body, so city council, planning commission, but also bike and ped, the environmental programs committee. It's going to include all the bodies that are elected, like city council, or created by a formal action of that legislative body, which is the city council. What are not legislative bodies? So for example, if this particular group says, hey, we want to put together a group of 2 of us to make a lot of comments for the neighborhood traffic management plan that the town is thinking about and working on, and we want them to kind of work outside of our public meetings and prepare a memo that we're going to then send to council with maybe the stamp of approval from our meeting body. That group of 2, that ad hoc subcommittee, that wouldn't constitute a legislative body. So you won't have to agendize their meetings. You won't have to keep records and minutes. And you might note that the city council creates these types of meeting bodies all the time. The ad hoc subcommittee for like the creating Legends Room or working on how they're going to recognize folks that have donated money and funds for the town center. Those are not meeting bodies as determined by the Brown Act. What's a meeting? So it's a pretty simple definition, and it's kind of broadly construed, but any congregation of the majority of the meeting body of the members, which is why you might have seen or heard at a council meeting, the city attorney, or in some cities, the city clerk might say, hey, we know that we have 3 or 4 members from this particular town committee or city committee. We want you to be aware that a majority of you should not comment on this item that you might find particularly of interest, because we haven't agendized this as a joint meeting, and so that could constitute a violation of the Brown Act. So if there was an item that was coming before city council and all of the bike and ped folks wanted to join, that's fine. We would advise that all 5 of you, or at least a majority, don't comment on that. So if an item is coming up before council and you guys all kind of discuss it at this and you agendize it for one of your meetings, we would advise, well, you come up with the points and the talking items that you would want a designated member of your committee to make to council, and then you do it in that format. Or if there's 2 of you that want to make comments, that's good. It's when we get into the quorum numbers where it could be tricky, and maybe we would just need to, if it was that important of a topic, put together like a joint meeting. Meeting does not include. So some people in some cities think, well, all 5 of our such and such members or such and such board members can't go to these conferences or can't go to a party or you can't get together. That's not the case at all. If the 3 or 4 of you find yourself standing, in a social event, you don't have to scatter to opposite ends of the room. You shouldn't talk town business or bike and ped business, but it's not a conference. It's not a social meeting. It doesn't discourage you from doing or participating in anything of that nature. So the next couple of things, serial meeting is a meeting, types of serial meetings. This is where I think a meeting body like yourself would really stand to kind of understand why the Brown Act exists and how it would benefit you. What will often happen is somebody will say, well, I know that I can't talk to 2 more of the members of my committee because that would be a violation. That would be like having a meeting. So if there's a topic and John talks to Jerry and then Jerry talks to David, well, that would be a serial meeting. So on the next slide, you'll see that that's like the chain example. A talks to B, B talks to C, so on and so forth. Other people have found creative ways, whether intentional or unintentional, and they'll use a hub and spoke. I think, David, I used this example, Mr. Jones, when we talked about the Brown Act training.
Great.
There's always unofficial, like town mayors or city mayors. There's always somebody who's not actually elected in office, but they're so in touch or in tap with what's going on that they serve as like the unofficial local kind of mayor or spokesperson. And A and B and C and D, they all talk to that person. And then guess what? That person goes out and talks to E and F and G and H. And some of those people, they're on these elected committees. That is a type of a serial meeting, and it's something that should be avoided. So you have to be kind of mindful when you're talking town business because you're on a formal committee. So if you want to have a conversation with one of your other members, be sure that they're not also then talking to somebody else. And it's more of a reminder to be mindful of this because of the great honor that's been bestowed upon you, but also just to be careful. Obviously, in today's day and age, we have access to a number of devices and ways to communicate, and so these rules apply to all of those, whether it's a text message or it's WhatsApp or Nextdoor or whatever the case may be. Purpose of the Brown Act, we've already kind of touched on that a bit. I'm gonna go down. Did I skip too far? Oh, I think I skipped back somehow. There we go. I'm going to skip over teleconferencing because we're in a new world now. We're all doing teleconferencing, but it used to be that if somebody wanted to join a public meeting and not be in person, you had to note that on the agenda, and wherever they were conducting the meeting from, they had to make that actual physical space available to members of the public. So you might have a situation where somebody who was on city council was like, oh, I'm going to be at a conference. Well, we would have to post the agenda in a public meeting space at the hotel they were staying at. And if they were going to do the meeting in their room, they'd have to put a notice on their door. And if somebody who happened to be from that jurisdiction or whomever wanted to participate, they would have to make their room accessible to them. That sounds nuts and it sounds crazy, especially in today's day and world where everybody's doing meetings from home. But that's why this has taken place. And there's a governor order right now that kind of removes all of that. But the thinking is that something will probably come in place to replace that in the next year or two. Agenda requirements. So I'm going to just show these slides really quick and then talk about them. So a regular meeting, we post the agenda 72 hours before a meeting. I know David meets that threshold by leaps and bounds. Most of our meeting bodies do. In terms of adding other items onto an agenda that haven't been agendized, we can add urgency items, and you could do that if you wanted to, and you would just need a majority vote to do something like that of the meeting body. Special meetings, which I don't believe this group has had or will likely have, but that just requires a 24-hour notice, and the same would be true for emergency meetings. Because we have electronic means available to us, we do require that we post our agendas on our website, and then we also post them at a meeting space that's known to the community, which right now, it's a trailer in the park. But at some point soon, it will be a beautiful facility right over in Town Hall, and people can come in and check that stuff out. Conduct of meetings. So for the most part, we're pretty laxed here, but essentially the conduct of meetings is the legislative body cannot discuss except limited questions or directions to staff or seek clarifications from a commenter. And what that means is if somebody comes to a meeting and they make a public comment, it's not advisable, at least, for that legislative body to get into a back and forth conversation with that member who makes that comment. Now, many jurisdictions, many cities, they have a slightly different approach. And I will tell you, in the town of Atherton, our council members feel very inclined to have conversations with our residents when they make public comments, because we're such a different, unique community in terms of size. And we have a lot of usual folks who will make comments. So you will see our council, and I think maybe even in your meeting body, if someone were to make a public comment at your meeting, you wouldn't say, thank you, moving right along. You'd probably engage them in conversation a bit. And I think that this is not an area where you would really need to be concerned about violating the Brown Act, but that's like an advisable thing. Somebody does not have to address where they live or their address, or even if they're a resident. Some people ask that when somebody's making a public comment, but the commenter does not need to do that. Voting. Most items require a simple majority vote. Some may require a higher level voting. That's not something that this meeting body would ever need to really be concerned about. Also, it's going to talk about closed sessions. I can't imagine a world where this committee would ever have a closed session. You're going to see closed sessions take place, labor negotiations. So when the town is working on a new contract or a new memorandum of understanding with our Atherton Police Officers Association, the initial and final stages of that negotiation would take place in closed session. The same would be true for like a city manager's evaluation or contract. If there's exposure to litigation or potential litigation or pending litigation, there would be closed session items. Or if we were going to acquire or purchase land or any asset, real estate, they would take some of those conversations in closed session. And the reason for that is so that they didn't, weaken their position by making all of that conversation public. And that's all allowed under the Brown Act. Violations. I'm going to kind of skip over this. I mean, the thing to note is, yes, there are civil and potentially criminal penalties associated with Brown Act violations. In my several years of local government and more in at least government services consulting, I've seen very, very few Brown Act violations that led to anything beyond maybe a civil penalty. And these were in some pretty severe, extreme, blatant, obvious circumstances, not somebody sent an email and they probably shouldn't have included all 4 of the members on it to communicate an item that had been talked about at a council meeting. If you do want to learn about some issues, there's a reference to a case that's there, and it's more information than you could possibly care to know. And so that is my power through expeditious version of it. I try to hit on the things that I think would be most relevant to you folks, but I am completely at your I'm willing to answer questions if you have them.
Well, I have one question, Anthony, and that goes back to this idea that there are non-official get-togethers possible. So in this particular case, since there are 3 of us, if I got together with one other, I guess that would still be under a quorum and not an official meeting, but then we're not supposed to discuss town business. Is that correct?
No. So there's a couple of things. If you and John want to go and have lunch, there's no rule against that. But if your meeting body says, hey, we really want to talk about a bike lane on Atherton Avenue, and we'd like to maybe put together an ad hoc subcommittee that starts the discussion and research on that, and John and David are a part of that, that's okay. And that doesn't need to be an agendized meeting. But you can't have you cannot have a majority of you participate in that meeting. So that ad hoc subcommittee to talk about, adding a bike lane on Atherton Avenue could meet, discuss, plan, research, whatever, bring that back to the full group, present it, and then you guys can make whatever decisions you like, and you can have that meeting wherever you want. But that doesn't need to be agendized. Now, if you do this ad hoc subcommittee to talk about a bike lane on Atherton Avenue, you cannot then also communicate with another member of your meeting body outside of an agendized meeting.
Got it. So any conclusions reached have to be presented in a meeting following an agenda.
Absolutely. So in the example that I gave, if you say, yeah, well, I think we know where we want to go, great. You prepare something, I'd suggest you send it over to David, something simple, whether you want a formal presentation or something that's emailed out, or you're going to give a verbal report, but then, yeah, you're not going to give that report until the publicly noticed meeting and that item is properly put on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Any other questions, guys? Well, you have my email. I'll post it. David could share it with you, but I believe you guys all have my email. If that changes, please reach out. As always, we thank you guys for volunteering your time. I know it's not always an easy lift to be a part of all these extra groups, so we certainly appreciate your efforts.
Well, thank you, Anthony.
All right, guys. David, I'm going to assign you the hosting, and I'm going to exit, okay?
All right, sounds good. David, we'll need to approve the minutes.
Right. So I'm assuming there were no public comments. So Jerry, John, were you both able to look over the minutes from November?
Yeah, I seem to remember looking over, I guess, last time, and I didn't see any problems, so I'm okay with it.
Okay. Jerry, any issues? Okay, so do you want me to call a formal vote, David, or is that enough?
Yes, please just call the formal vote.
Okay, so John, how do you vote?
Approve.
Jerry? Okay, I can lip read. And, and I also approve, so.
Approve, yeah, sorry.
It's all right, it's all right. And so then we're off to our regular agenda. And really this is just an opportunity to discuss stuff that's cropped up in the local traffic planning, and also specifically some of the stuff that popped up in a year ago November's council meeting, that PowerPoint of the survey results on traffic and related issues, which I found kind of disturbing. Although rereading that particular thing, this was the this one where the consultants pulled out data from the survey. I can't really, as long as it's in front of me, I just can't get it. Anyway, it was that PowerPoint display to the council, and I was just struck by the fact that the second highest level of concern in the town is for unsafe walking or biking. There are three slides in there that give some detail, including the map slide. So that's the concerns in various locations. Leads off with Stockbridge, there's Alameda, there's El Camino, and then the map here actually pinpoints locations where there were multiple comments. So I don't know whether you had a chance to look that over or not. But I guess I'll start off by asking either any of you if there are any particular items in either of those documents that you would like to discuss.
Yeah, I guess I'm maybe a little bit surprised that, well, maybe I'm not surprised, but say Alameda, because it has bike lanes on it. And I guess people are still, even with a road with bike lanes, people are still hesitant or have perceptions that they're really not safe. And
I think, if I'm not mistaken, David, perhaps you know better, but that's lumped together. That's pedestrians and cycling. Is that correct?
Yes.
yeah, well, yeah, they're pedestrians are a little bit problematic. You can't, there's no, sidewalk per se. You end up walking on, dirt.
And it's actually, most of it's sloped dirt as well.
Yeah, just random dirt, I guess. That's what I would call it. People made their paths. So it's not ideal. Yeah, it'd be good to know that whether it was whether it's primarily a bike problem or a pedestrian problem, because that's really sort of two different things.
Well, if you compare what you see in West Atherton, not up in the hills, but between El Camino and Alameda, and then Alameda itself, the number of pedestrians is incredibly low. It's fairly high, like late afternoon and evening
Yep.
in West Atherton, but on Alameda, it's almost non-existent.
I see a few on Alameda. I do see a few because I cycle that, so it's pretty, so I'll see it. But yeah, you're correct on this. Other streets like Polhemus, not so much Stockbridge, but you'll see, a fair amount of pedestrians.
Camino al Lago, Park Ave, sees a lot of foot traffic.
Right.
Alameda, almost nothing. At least in
Yeah.
comparison. Let's put it this way: when I cycle through West Atherton, I generally, and if it's like late afternoon, I generally have my radar up for pedestrians, often on both sides,
Mhm.
quite often moving in the same direction on both sides.
Right.
And if I'm on Stockbridge, it's just not a concern.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there's enough traffic to discourage people from walking, unfortunately. There's really not much place to walk on Stockbridge.
But people do.
People do. But, so anyway, so yeah, it would have been nice. Yeah, I guess the breakdown would have been nice to see whether it was this pedestrian problem or a bike problem, because that sort of directs what you can do.
David, is there any way to split out that data, or was the question just simply asked, and then was the question asked in a lumped fashion, or was the data from two separate questions lumped together? Do you know?
I do not know. I can ask the director and see if it could be split up for pedestrians versus bicyclists.
Because that's worth some thinking about. I don't know offhand. The roads that come off of Alameda in West Atherton are almost all, with the exception of Polhemus and Stockbridge, they're all cul-de-sacs, aren't they? Even going up into the hills, they eventually peter out.
Stockbridge goes through Atherton Avenue. It goes at least a mile. It's not necessarily. And then I guess the other one is Fletcher, which sort of loops around and hooks into Atherton Avenue. The hills there.
Yeah, and I guess if you go up Stockbridge far enough, you can then wend your way through to.
Yeah, I do this all the time. It gets me onto Woodside Road.
Yeah.
And I see people walking there all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, so if you live on that side of Alameda, you have plenty of walking you can do.
Yeah, but there's no sidewalks if that's a problem.
I'm assuming that the fact that we don't have sidewalks is possibly the main reason that unsafe for walking or biking pops up as the second highest concern. I'm going to assume it's mostly pedestrians, although there are certainly some locations in town where it can be dicey bicycling. There's the hairpin turn on Isabella, which 99% of the time is just not an issue, but at 1%, it's a very narrow road with a really sharp 90-degree turn.
Right. Yeah, I guess you may be right that it's mostly a pedestrian problem. I guess when I first joined the committee several years ago, one of the things that presented to us is about right-of-ways on various streets, and the pavement that, and David can correct me or not on this, but generally the pavement that exists is just I don't know, 3/4 of the right-of-way that the town has. I'm just grabbing a number. So in other words, you could, in theory, add, the town has more right-of-way than the actual pavement. So in theory, one could put sidewalks or something like that. But what's working against that is most of the residents have encroached upon that roadway width. And I think the town is sort of hesitant to challenge possession of is 9/10 of the law type thing. You know, it's just not a politically.
Well, certainly from a political standpoint, it would be unpopular.
Right, exactly. And so I don't think the town has had the inclination to push for, you know, people to get their hedges off the city right away or town right away. So anyway, that's potential. That's arguably a problem for people, for pedestrians, as well as for potential bike lanes too.
I would think that, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, but bike lanes are usually added to the existing pavement, aren't they?
Anthony Kokler? Anthony's no,
I think you mean David.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Late afternoon, lack of caffeine. Sorry, David, aren't bike lanes usually added to existing pavement? Has Atherton ever added in pavement to accommodate bike lane?
We have not added any additional asphalt to the road. Normally for the roadway, the roadway itself is about 50% of the right of way that we own.
So it could be.
I mean, we could, but the town's charter, we kind of have it as more rural as possible.
Right.
So if you put sidewalks in, then you're ending up changing the characteristic of the town's charter, which will make it more city-like, and you'll have more cut through.
I don't know whether that follows, but anyway, but yeah, it's just, in other words, it's basically it's a choice that the town has to make.
Well, it seems to me that the town has already made the choice in many cases, although presumably, there might be, for example, along Middlefield, along the edge of Lindenwood, there is a path between the wall and the elm trees.
Right.
That gets used quite a bit for Ensenal School and also for MA. And that's actually quite handy because the bicycle lane there on northbound Middlefield sees a lot of bicycle traffic, and putting pedestrians there is an issue. They have a place to walk. It's not improved. It is a dirt path, but it is available. Has the town ever thought about memorializing that in concrete?
I believe portions of it actually is asphalt. If we blow off the leaves, there is some asphalt underneath.
Seriously?
Wow.
Well, I had no idea. Interesting.
I guess the other thing one could consider is that, along a lot of these roads, and I've had to deal with this at night. I sometimes remember once taking the El Camino bus home from the airport, but it was when we got to, what was it? Probably near Selby Lane and on El Camino, that's where we got off. And we had to walk the roadways at dark. Fortunately, we had flashlights, but it could be that the town could encourage the homeowners to not encroach upon where people can walk, so that one can walk reasonably safely at night, albeit with a flashlight, and stay off the roadway.
I think in Lindenwood, at least, I'm not sure about the rest of Atherton, you can't build anything within 6 feet of the road.
We do have height restrictions. The first 3 feet is meant for safe refuge for pedestrians, but especially in Lindenwood, you're going to find that a lot of oleanders and large plants are along the edge of the road,
Yeah, that's the problem. I think.
which unless you're willing to complain about it, there isn't. We're not going to go out and enforce the entire Lindenwood. We would have the whole association coming back and hunt us down.
Yeah, there'd be a mutiny.
It's it is occasionally enforced. There are I'm at the corner of Irving and Magnolia, and on the Irving side, we used to have a line of Monterey pines. I think we've now lost them all. But I left some stumps there, and somebody years ago came by and said, no, they're too close to the roadway. So those actually have to be back 6 feet, which means using that area for parking is perfectly possible, which means that, especially in the wintertime, it's not an area of refuge. It's an area of churned up mud from construction trucks.
Oh boy.
So, I mean, I suppose if your choice is being hit by a vehicle or getting your shoes muddy, it's not much, it's not a difficult calculation, but it is a mess and it's rather unsightly. But, I've learned from experience, until it stops raining, there's just not much I can do.
Right. I guess one could add pea gravel.
And I don't know how many tons I would have to add before.
I probably have that quite a bit, but anyway, that's I see that on trail.
It would just churn into Adobe at some point.
Right. Anyway, so I guess that's the decision the town has to make internally, is whether, if you want to walk or want pedestrians to feel reasonably safe, then you have to accommodate them. But if your people want, quote, the rural feel and whatever, well, you're going to have pedestrians out in the street, and therefore they're not going to be walking, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's a trade-off that needs to be probably explicitly talked about.
So, David, I have a question. Is there any data on pedestrians in particular, and whether or not they're following I don't know whether it's a legal requirement or it's just, what you do. I quite often will see pedestrians moving in on both sides of the road in the same direction. It's supposed to be walk left, bike right. But I would say probably 60% of the pedestrians, maybe 70% of the pedestrians I see are walking with traffic, not against it. Do we have any data on that?
I personally don't. Perhaps Sergeant Mesker can chime in on that.
As far as data is concerned, I don't think we've ever collected information about who's walking on which side of the street. But you're right. A lot of the slower streets, pedestrians just kind of wander and meander, around in their own way. It doesn't necessarily seem to be all that unsafe. However, in Lindenwood, there are a number of turns and corners where they're difficult to see, whether pedestrians are walking the right direction or the wrong direction on a certain corner or bend in the roadway. It's always going to be somewhat hazardous.
Well, and James Ave for pedestrians, I've never figured out why anyone would choose to walk on James when they could walk parallel much more safely. I'm just wondering whether or not walking with traffic increases a sense of being unsafe, because you can't see the traffic coming. You might be able to hear it, but you can't see it. If you're walking opposite, then you can see it. And usually drivers will give you more leeway if you're walking in the opposite direction. You make contact and drivers will move over farther.
Well, again, I don't think we have any data or information concerning, how often people are walking the wrong side of the road.
Well, since this pandemic started, I'm seeing people walking right down the middle of the road. It's been, and in one sense, living in Lindenwood, would I go, well, keeps cars going slower because you don't know what to expect when you're driving. It's not great for bicycling because you have no clue which way these people are going to walk, whether they're going to turn right or left as you approach them from behind. But there are no rules these days.
I have to admit, usually I'll give pedestrians a warning, like on your left. And there are occasions, especially in Linden, where I say, pick a side.
Yeah. Well, and then a number of people have, they're listening to something, so they don't hear you anyway.
It's true. It's true. David, what sort of education has the town ever attempted on pedestrian etiquette?
I don't think if we've ever had etiquette training for pedestrian walking.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about training, but maybe a information push on what's allowed or what's preferred and why.
I think the Lindenwood Homes Association has put stuff in their newsletter.
Okay.
We put out the Athertonian, that our town newsletter, and I get an opportunity to put information in there. In the next one, I can most certainly give a reminder for our walking public, which side of the street to walk on. Just some safety tips for pedestrians.
I think it's been in there recently, because I have read something either from the police chief or one of the town newsletters about walking facing traffic.
No, you're right. Sergeant Kokler, who was the traffic sergeant prior to myself, he would prepare articles for the Athertonian, and he did a pedestrian safety one. But if we're still, being that it's still somewhat COVID and people are home a lot, working from home and such, and I think probably a lot of people continue to work from home even after COVID is over. We're going to get people that are out taking breaks. They're not in their offices anymore. They're home all day, and for lunch they'll just walk out there, open their front door and go for a walk during the middle of the day, or take a break, go for a walk. So we have seen a lot more pedestrian traffic since the beginning of COVID about a year ago.
If I could ask, if you do prepare an article, and I'm going to suggest that having it in more than once a year is probably not a mistake, because it's going to be news to some people every time, and that is to remind folks who are walking their dogs to keep their dogs on the inside, and not, sorry, I guess I need to, on the non-traffic side. It's always, whether I'm cycling or I'm driving, when dogs are on the street side, you have two things you have to worry about, and that is how long is that leash, and is the dog going to dart in front? Because that's happened, especially on my cycle. Dogs will catch, will hear my approach much sooner than people will, especially if those people have headphones in, and they'll lunge out. If they're on the so if you're walking in the correct direction, you got your dog in your left hand. They're walking, along the very edge of the road, or possibly on the unimproved strip of dirt. if they notice you in that situation, it's really not that big a deal, because it's going to be obvious to the dog walker that they've crossed in front of them, they've crossed behind them. But when it's in the opposite situation, it's just an extension of where they are. And the last thing I want to do is alter somebody's relationship with their dog. Are there any guidelines for dog walking?
Well, I think there's, yeah, probably common sense guidelines, something that along the lines you just expressed, but nothing as far as legally is going to be concerned for the vehicle code. However, when people are out walking their dogs or pets, they are required to be on a leash and within and also be considered in control of. So, somebody out there with a 20-foot leash may not exactly be considered, may follow the restriction of being on a leash, but still not necessarily in control. The dog can lunge all the way across the street out in front of traffic. So,
well, if you do get an article in the Athertonian, a few words about dog walking etiquette would be at least much appreciated from me.
sure, that's no problem. Always a good reminder, and even though Sergeant Coker may have hit upon pedestrian traffic, the dog aspect is also something else that can be touched upon.
I'm a avid dog walker when I have a dog. It's been 3-4 years now since we did, and it was something I was always very conscious of. Although I will say I did have a real leash, but I also had a very well-trained dog, and I could let him out. It wasn't 20 feet, I think it was 12 feet. And he would respond to verbal commands, tugs. So I never really worried a whole bunch about that. A 20-footer might have been a different story.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you see people out there with those, it's mainly those retractable leashes that extend out to 20 feet.
They're out there. They're out there. And then there are the ones who, think, well, I have a border collie. They're bred for verbal commands and no leash in sight.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm not exactly sure where we need to leave this. I think, David, you've been tasked with seeing if there's any way to disaggregate bicycle and pedestrian data in that survey. And if there is, I guess we'd like to see it.
I think there are a couple things I would like to think about. I don't, again, this is something, no, obviously just for discussion, but I guess one is the various traffic calming items. That can be controversial, and whether they work or not, that's another item. And in other words, if you start, for instance, I suspect I've heard that the fire district is not too keen on some of the means of traffic calming, like speed humps or something like that, or roadway narrowing. That's too drastic that they can't get their vehicles through. But I guess the question is what's acceptable for the town, as far as traffic calming. And then the other thing is, and I don't think this was covered in the handouts, I guess Menlo Park is, I don't know the specifics, but they're just some degree reducing speed limits throughout the town, so they're nominally 25 miles per hour. Obviously that, from a legal perspective, is problematic because the speeds are usually set by a traffic survey, and you've got the 85% level, et cetera, which, on some roads that will push it, say in Menlo Park, that may be the percentile level allow 30 miles per hour. So the police may be able to give tickets, but if the person who gets the ticket knows about, the 85 percentile and also the traffic surveys, they may be able to fight it in court. So I don't know whether Atherton is up for doing an arbitrary speed limit reduction with the possibility that the police will be sort of in a no-win situation.
We follow the 85th percentile.
Oh yeah, I know you have to follow it, but in terms of, say the 85 percentile speed limit is 30, is a town willing to actually drop it to 25?
Only if the council agrees to it.
Right. So, but it needs to be, that's, the question is whether even the council will even consider that.
Oh, I think the city council is considering that,
Okay,
because that was discussed a few months ago, what Menlo Park was doing. And I know at the time Rick DeGolia was the mayor and he liked that idea.
okay.
There was some recent discussion of lowering the speed limit on Middlefield Road to 25 because Menlo Park was considering lowering their speed limit on Middlefield. However, I think that was something that was not going to occur. The issue is that you can go out and put up a sign that says the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. But for us to go out and write tickets for it and enforce that, there has to be some bite to it. And that's where our speed surveys come in. So, if the speed survey comes in and says the critical speed is 32 miles an hour and their recommendation is 30 miles an hour, and we put up a 25-mile-an-hour zone, we're still not going to be able to start stopping vehicles until they reach that 32-mile-an-hour. And then even merely the fact that we arbitrarily put up this 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign when the recommended speed, taken by a survey of vehicles in the area, is 30, there might be some issue there as well. We can't just, we ran into this problem years ago. There were some speed limit signs in Lloyden Park for 20 miles an hour. And I think somebody got a ticket there and became an issue. This was probably 15 years ago, at least. Somebody got a ticket in there for going over 20 miles an hour and fought it. And then we realized, hey, we can't just put these speed limit signs up.
So you wouldn't, if the town decided to do it, you wouldn't be ticketing people. You'd just say I think part of it is their hope that if they put up 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs, in a year or two, people will be going slightly slower, do another survey, and be within limits to start ticketing people.
Well, that's one theory. I don't, cars tend to travel at a speed that they think that they feel safe at. And it's that 15% of people that travel too fast. That's where we get our, tickets. And we couldn't even stop cars. We couldn't even, that's a detainment, versus stop somebody. We couldn't even make a traffic stop, let alone issue a ticket.
I'm just trying to picture cars being limited to 25 miles an hour on Valparaiso. And that's occasionally happened to me. There's somebody in front who thinks it's 25. I can't ever imagine, even if it's posted at 25, outside of some outliers. And I have to admit that when I'm driving on small streets in Lindenwood, in Central Atherton, I'm at 25 or less. But on Valparaiso or Atherton Ave, I would be highly surprised if the theory that if you posted at 25 in a year or two, you'd be able to ticket at 25. It'd be pushing it.
And it is a little bit of a butterfly effect. We have these increased speed limit signs on streets that are built or designed for speeds that are a little bit faster than 25. And that way we can get the majority of vehicles on those streets. Atherton Avenue is a big wide street with huge easements on both sides. And if you lower the speed limit on Atherton Avenue to 25, then people are going, well, I'll just take Tuscaloosa, or I'll just take Almondrell, or
Right.
I'll just take Selby Lane. So if it's designed to be faster, then why go up Atherton Avenue?
In Atherton is what is it called? A collector?
Correct. Arterial.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the council decides on that. It'll be interesting to see if Menlo Park really moves forward with it, I would think that Atherton would be well advised to wait and see.
Yeah, it'd be interesting how this experiment works. It's, whether it's arguably it's sort of like I guess you see the flashing speed signs, when you pass up, it's on Alpine Road. There are several of them that emphasize, actually, I think the town has some, and this committee has made recommendations where to put them. But anyway, whether they actually work, where, that you flash the vehicle speed, and if they're going over the speed limit, the sign flashes either white, or if you're grossly over, I think it even turns red. I don't remember. But anyway, I don't know. I guess the question is, I don't know how much impact that has.
Well, we have a automatic speed on James. There's one on Watkins.
Right.
And I'm trying to remember where else they exist. I know
They move them around, I think, periodically. I think that was
they
the idea.
used to, but these two at least are permanent installation.
Okay.
We have a couple of fixed ones that we got approved 2 years ago, I believe.
Something like that.
Yeah, we have one on Selby that runs north-south.
That's right.
And then we have another one on Selby east-west. There's actually two, one in each direction.
Mhm.
I haven't noticed those.
There is one on south side, southbound Alameda, when you get close between Colado and Atherton Avenue.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there's some there. So, yeah, I don't know whether they actually are effective, but anyway, they're there. So, but anyway,
They're effective for me within limits. Probably the least effective is on Alpine Road in Palo Alto.
or you mean Portola Valley or whatever,
Valley, yeah.
or Ladera, I guess. County put them, that would be Ladera.
Um,
There's also some on Santa Cruz, Alameda, between Avey and Sandhill.
oh,
And
oh
that-
yeah, sure. Yeah, there is so northbound on Santa Cruz from Sandhill, there's one there. And
Yeah, I think
that's
there
where
was-
they posted 25 miles an hour.
That's correct. There's a
And
history
gotta
on
be-
that one.
That's got to be way below the 85th percentile.
Yeah, it turns out there's a loophole, and the county can get away with it. You'll also notice that in that section, there's a senior housing. Although to move into that senior housing, you have to be, I think, all of 55. And
Right.
it's a condominium, but it's limited to people who are 55 or older, but there's no amenities for being.
On the west side, sure.
Yeah, so apparently if you have senior housing, you can drop the speed limit to 25.
Well, there was a senior killed there about,
There was, but this was lowering the speed limit there, and I was involved with this. It was really in reaction to the residents that live in that corridor. They thought that, that motor vehicle speeds were traveling much too fast for that corridor, especially when people were living there and cycling through and whatever. So the county found that loophole to actually drop the speed limit to 25. And that also allowed them to put sharrows in, because I guess the county was hesitant to put in sharrows when the speed limit was supposed to be 35. But they were okay when the posted speed limit was 25. Anyway, that's,
From a psychological standpoint, and you're behind the wheel of a car, it's really difficult to keep it to 25 on a 4-lane road.
oh yeah, definitely. I've asked the Public Works whether they've done before and after or speed survey to find out whether it's had any impact. I really haven't seen any data whether it's had any impact. So anyway,
It'd be interesting to see if Menlo Park can make it stick on Middlefield between Willow and
oh, right,
Ravenswood.
right.
Well, shall we move on then to new business?
Fine with me.
Yeah.
So, and that's actually back to our November and December traffic stops.
We have it all the way until February. It's a typo.
Oh, it is. Okay. Oh, that's right, because it's here in the pack.
Yep.
Sure.
Sergeant Mesker, can you present?
Yeah, for November, December, that was right during the beginning of the uptick in COVID cases, and our agency decided to run minimum staffing, trying to hold back about half of our normal staffing at home on reserve in case there's an exposure to a particular patrol team. Officers were indicated that the contacts, especially self-initiated contacts like traffic stops or bicycle stops, were to be kept at an absolute minimum to try and reduce contact with the general public. So for those 2 months, and even for, I think, actually all the way through about January 10th, you're going to see that there's not a lot of contacts for bicyclists. And then moving into the later half of January and February, there's still not a lot. I think it's particularly because there's less traffic out there due to weather, inclement weather, although we're in the middle of a bit of a drought. However,
Inclement can be temperature too.
correct.
I was struck by I don't know, just an interesting pattern I noticed in the November map. There were a lot of sort of non-arterial stops, and you go to December and January and February, and they mainly seem to be along major corridors. Is that part of it? I mean, is that part of, somebody's on a major corridor, they see somebody cycling the wrong direction, they'll make a stop?
Look at this from a different perspective. That there's not really time elements that are attached to those bicycle stops. So while may not be out doing a lot of bicycle enforcement on like the Alameda or the major thoroughfares, some of the stops you're going to see there are going to be occurring at 2 o'clock in the morning on a back street. In other words,
Right.
we get a bicyclist riding his bike on a back street in the middle of the night. We're gonna stop that guy and talk to him.
Okay,
So
sure.
yeah, so when you see street, I didn't know we had a lot of bicyclists on Tuscaloosa. That's why. Somebody out there biking around, snooping around in the dark and in the middle of the night.
Right. Okay. I hadn't thought about that at all. Yeah, I think because you guys are on 24/7.
Not all bicyclists wear spandex. Some of them wear much different types of clothing, especially at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I think also with these flock cameras, bicycles are a good way for burglars to get about because you can't record a license plate.
No, you can't. That flock system has been a real asset, though, in the short time that we've got it. And we're still on a little bit of a learning curve, but we had an attempted homicide, and that's how we caught our guys, was those flock cameras.
Yeah, I read about that. Good work, guys.
That was a different patrol team than mine, but those guys did a really good job. They moved quickly and got information from those flock cameras, and we had a license plate within, probably 2 hours of the incident occurred.
That's pretty cool. And meanwhile, they think they've gotten away clean.
And there's 2 more cameras going up in Lindenwood.
Oh,
Correct. We're going to have a total of about 43 cameras around town. And then there's some talk, we can't put cameras on El Camino due to the high volume of traffic. However, there is a new type of camera or system that is going to make it available for us to start reading license plates and recording license plates on El Camino.
Okay. That's going to like triple your data, isn't it?
Probably, pretty much, yeah. You know, we've had to do some extra training here around. You know, we a lot of our patrol teams will just, you know, do some training on felony car stops, because we're getting a lot of stolen vehicles, a lot of felony wanted vehicles that we never would have come across before in the past. Even Menlo Park monitors our radio channels now, listening for our flock hits, so they can join in and try and catch some of these guys.
Yeah, you don't have much time to respond when a car is moving through Atherton on El Camino.
Right. But you know what? Sometimes we get that hit where, you know, they are, you know, headed, you know, the flock camera on Marsh Road heading into town. And then we get an opportunity to and then we get another hit on the same car, and then another hit. We kind of get an idea for what direction they're going, so we can start heading that way. So you got to move quickly, but yeah, we've had a lot of luck with that.
So is the data real time?
Yeah, not even 10 seconds.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. You guys have any questions?
Nope. I'm good.
Thank you much. We've had our Brown Act training already. So we're on to future agenda items, but David, you have this listed as a revisit of the mid-block crosswalk by Encinal.
Yes, that is the one that you guys requested to revisit the crosswalk. There is currently one there already. In the school district actually requested, well, not the school, the parents of the students wanted to either relocate the crosswalk or do something to enhance that crosswalk, because the traffic, I guess the crossing guard was nearly hit, and a lot of the vehicles are cutting on, driving onto the bike lane. So that was one that you guys wanted from, I believe, November.
Right.
So this is the crosswalk by a little bit west of the district office.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I went out there and observed for probably an hour or so. Actually, when I was there through, I think I did a morning and afternoon, and the crossing guard did almost nothing the entire time. They didn't have anybody that wanted to cross. But I mean, it's just not in an ideal place, because people are riding their bikes up onto the sidewalk or the district office to get to the crosswalk and then going across there. So they want to move it closer to the parking, the driveway, or to the street.
They wanted to enhance the crosswalk with some rapid flashing beacon on either side of or something to kind of enhance it so that people do not hit the pedestrians or the crossing guard, or trying to get the parents to not speed in that area, just to make it.
Wasn't there something about moving it to an actual corner of a road, or?
There was a study for it, and I will provide it to you on the next agenda. Next
Okay.
week.
My recollection looking at that was that it didn't rise to, what is it called, loss of service?
I'm not sure about that, but we couldn't get, Menlo Park said that if you wanted to relocate it at the corner, which is the best option, you have to get all of the neighboring properties to agree to it. And no, they had an objection by one of the residents.
Okay. So I guess we can look at that in the next meeting.
Yes, and then other items that you guys wanted. John wanted to talk about traffic calming measures. I know that we do have a neighborhood traffic management plan that we have previously approved. So I will bring it to the committee, and then also the breakdown between, if there's a breakdown between the pedestrians and bicyclists from slide 11 of the presentation.
Right,
Right.
right.
It's on traffic calming. I guess I just sort of what's acceptable in terms of the town, because there's a whole spectrum of.
Yes,
Way
there
doing-
is. But
So-
basically, depending on the if it's a thoroughfare that the fire department uses, we would have to get an agreement with them. But it's just a matter of what type of calming measures would be agreeable, on that corridor.
Right.
So we have May 25 as our next meeting. Anyone see any problems with that? I guess
I will not be here,
okay,
May
well,
25th.
unless we can all make it at the moment, we wouldn't have a quorum. So I take a quick look at my calendar here.
I'm going to be gone essentially from the month of May.
Yeah, no, it wasn't about the CSP idea. So I said that.
Well, would it make sense then to push it to early June?
That would, let me check. I think that works.
My calendar too, I think.
Yeah, June is better. Yeah, first week of June.
So June 1st, or would you prefer the 8th?
Oh, no, the first would be
I was
best.
thinking maybe that is what's causing.
John, do you know if that works for you?
I think that works for me. I don't have it in there. I know that I've got somewhere, maybe it's the latter part of June, or maybe it's early July. I've got to
Showing
back
up
up.
now,
yet.
so the
I don't
technical
quite
issues
remember.
resolved.
Okay.
Early June should be
I will
fine.
update the ticket.
All right, well,
I was
then let's
wondering if
plan
you
on
did something
doing
to fix that.
June 1, David, so push it
I
up.
asked. Okay, since
All right,
you-
first Tuesday of June. I believe that's the Tuesday right after Memorial Day.
Correct.
So hopefully no one's on vacation.
It's last, but I don't want to go anywhere over the holidays.
Yeah, actually, for retired folks, Memorial Day is when you don't want to be out and about.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We didn't maybe taking a holiday.
So David, unless you have something planned,
No, I'm all right. We will. I will schedule it for the 1st of June.
okay, great. So shall we adjourn then until next time?
Yeah, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you much.
Approved.
Yeah, we're done.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
folks.